Hi, Ruth. How's it going?
Hi Austin, I'm well. How are you?
Almost perfect, I gotta say, especially after watching your film, which, by the way, really enjoyed it, I gotta say.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I didn't know what to expect going into this film. I mean, knowing as a ghost story movie, but gotta say, creeped me the heck out in more ways than one, I have to tell you. So, first of all, I just want to get right into it. So, like this movie, there have been many other ghost story films out there. What was your approach when it came to making this one?
I guess I wanted to make a film, uh, first of all, from a child's point of view, a child's eye view on the world, and there are various films that influenced me in that. Um, and I guess I felt that this child who is excluded and slightly invisible from the adult world, rattling around in this big old house, but really unseen, was a little bit like a living ghost, because she wears dark clothes against these dark walls, and she's kind of camouflaged and overhears adult conversations, and but doesn't always get the full picture because she's held at arm's length and really kind of not seen and not heard or not even seen. So I guess I thought, and that made me think she's a little bit like a ghost herself, and that's what binds her to this little visitor that visits her at night. This being invisible, and this desire to be heard and seen by the adult world. So that was the kind of seed for this kind of ghost story. And I think you know it's tricky when you have children in horror because I didn't want to kind of make an exploitative film or have,
Yeah.
it's kind of, and you don't want to like put an adult idea or stamp on a child's performance. So I wanted to have these very natural children and try and mold the world to their viewpoint. But I think it can create something interesting because children are naturally curious, and children say what they see. So if they see something, they're going to say it, and I think that's interesting for a ghost story.
So, speaking of which, I feel
Oh,
like that you're all, trust me, happens to me all the time when I'm filming my stuff. So speaking of which, let's go into the performances of the children because I feel like that when it comes to horror films, especially kids, I feel like that kids can make or break a horror film, especially when it lies on their shoulders. But
yeah.
Indica, she's a star. How did you find her? And I wonder how many little girls did you audition before finding Indica?
Well, Indica is a star, but I love Indica, but Indica's in the shorts.
Oh my! You know the strange thing is, I was trying to find the short film. I couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was more like a proof of concept for the
Oh,
feature.
okay.
Uh, but Kira Thompson, who's in the feature, she's amazing, and
Mm-hmm.
she has this incredible. Because we had to recast for several reasons. Time had gone on a little bit. It was a couple of years after we made the
Mm.
short, and tonally it had moved slightly, and we found Kira through quite a large casting process, and it was also about her chemistry with this little visitor who visits her at night, and finding this natural connection in which these two kids had when we found them together. We did lots of pairings, but Kira, it's interesting with children because you don't want to kind of, you don't want a performance, and
Yeah.
you don't want it to be artificial, or it was all about keeping it very natural and trying to, instead of bending them to the film, bending the film to them, and keeping them in the moment, just keeping it very spontaneous. So we didn't really talk about the adult world and the story arc. I gave the script to the parents, and they were able to talk about whatever they thought was appropriate, but we just kept it in the moment of their relationship, and each thought, and keeping it spontaneous like that. And we were just really lucky to find those girls, and it was very clear when they came into the room that they just didn't perform. They just evolved the character by using their own personalities and their own experience and their own emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Indica. There were more than a few scenes where I just thought this girl needs to be in more stuff because she is that good. So speaking of the horror element, I am a horror film junkie. I love being scared, and this movie takes a very unconventional approach. I mean, there are jump scares to which there's one that almost made me scream, and that rarely happens with me. this movie takes a very unconventional approach to horror. Can you talk about the way that you approached the more unsettling tone to this film?
Yeah. So again, that emerged through the proof of concept through the short. I think getting it right tonally. I mean, I was very heavily influenced by a lot of the ghost story cinematic genre. So I was Guillermo del Toro and Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth, The Orphanage. Um, Even the others a little bit. There's a beautiful old Spanish film from the 70s called Spirit of the Beehive, which has these very natural performances from two children, and so that was the kind of aesthetic I was aiming at. Um, and I think it's much more ghost story than horror. It's not overtly horror, and so I'm so glad it's on Shudder, because I think Shudder have this really eclectic kind of selection of different films across the genre, because it's such a wide genre. But we had to find something that was really rooted in this child's eye and this child's world. So it was again bending the horror to that experience, really, rather than putting children into kind of
Yeah.
a horror movie that would have been a very different movie, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say it would be a very traumatic experience to say the least for them.
Well, there are great films like that, but
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
it can be quite it can be a little bit of an potentially exploitative process.
Just a tad bit. So let's get into the actual scares. So I want to thank you really quick because there are so there's one particular thing I don't like in horror films when they put in false alarm scares that accompanies a loud sound. You don't do that, which I applaud you for, because there are many directors out there, as many horror films, that when the sound just eases out and all of a sudden you hear a bat, and then it's like, what the heck did you do that for? Uh, does that also frustrate you when you see horror films that do that same thing and they do the loud, conventional, cheap false alarm jump scare as well?
Yeah, totally. And I really love doing the sound design with Ben Baird on this film. And it was we wanted to do something very subtle. And again, because it was so rooted in these children's very natural performances, we wanted the sound design to reflect that, because it's so much of her internal narrative, this one child, that you're seeing everything through. I didn't want to suddenly put some great big, tropes in the form of big bangs and sounds. And it was about making it very subtle and very detailed, just like little details of these little things that she carries and collects and scavenges. And so I feel there's an awful lot going on in the sound design, but it is very small and detailed. So I'm really glad you picked up on that. Obviously, I'd love everyone to see it in the cinema where you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I can, dude. I agree so much. This was a movie I was watching, is thinking I would have loved to have seen this. I mean, don't get me wrong, Shudder is a great
Oh,
platform
I'm
for this
so,
movie.
so excited about Shadow. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta tell you, I don't really use streaming services personally, but after seeing this, I want to get Shudder right away so I can watch this
Oh,
even better quality, because I liked it that much. I was, I didn't know what to expect from this film because I didn't watch a trailer. I went into a completely blind eyes, thought this was really freaking good. One other thing I want to talk about. So a lot of horror productions out there, some of them, not all of them, they say they have some very strange occurrences happening on set. Was there anything unique or anything that may have happened on set that you can talk about?
So we were filming in a big old house. It was very, very cold. It was the winter. There was no central heating in the house. We all got sick. This is
Ooh,
pre-COVID, thankfully. Just at the end of
okay.
the end of 2019, we were shooting. Um, it was. I felt okay in the house. I mean, I grew up in these big old church-owned houses where things did go bump in the night. But um, I felt okay in the house. But I think a couple of other crew members mentioned they heard some weird things. So I can't tell you. It was cold. It was
Oh,
dark. I didn't want to. I think there was one time when we were doing some test footage. I had this brilliant art director called May, and she slept overnight with the stuff in the house, the camera kit, because we were shooting the next day, and I wasn't keen to sleep there at night. There was no electricity or heat in the house, and she was just like, yeah, it's fine, yeah. Like, I think some people are very practical and don't tune into those things, but I wasn't that keen to stay there overnight.
oh, trust me, I don't blame you. Especially, I mean, the house looked absolutely amazing, but I don't blame you thinking, yeah, a place like that. No, thank you. I want to go to a hotel or some type of restaurant or some type of thing that has
Like,
electricity.
yeah.
Pretty much. Another thing I want to ask. So I love talk about the editing process in a film, and I can imagine there must have been a couple of sequences or even a few scares that you probably love so much that you probably couldn't have because even though they probably must have scared the TBGBs out of anyone who saw it really, were there any particular parts that even though you loved them, you found that they just quite didn't work out in the edit, or is the film true to your vision?
Um, I'm very happy with the film. Obviously, I mean, I've made micro budget features before, and this was a bigger budget, but still a small budget in terms of filmmaking. And obviously, you always have to find ways around the budget. Um, we were going to have this long sweeping drone shot at the beginning along this road, this tree-lined road, and for some reason, with the guys who turned up, there was no signal for the drone. I don't know if it was the trees or what. So we thought, what are we going to do? We've only closed this road for one day. What are we going to do? So we came up with the idea of we got a rickshaw. And we put the Steadicam guy on the rickshaw, and then my incredible grip legged it down the road multiple takes as fast as he could with the Steadicam on a rickshaw to get the opening shot on the road. So I mean, things like that happen, and we got the shot. And I'm really happy with it. But things change, things are
Yeah.
different, and you have to keep problem solving and find creatively rewarding ways to problem solve. So that's just the challenge of indie filmmaking, I guess.
And I got that opening shot was really free. I just thought, okay, I want to see this director go places. And
Oh,
truly,
thank
it truly was really well done. So I am a big fan of ghost stories out there, not just from other horror films, but ghost stories in general. Were there any particular ghost stories that you heard as a kid or even as a young adult that felt so personal that you put your experiences hearing them into this particular film?
you. So yeah, I had a vivid imagination as a child, and I guess the story of the monks fleeing the monastery is from my
Ooh,
childhood.
that's a good one right there.
I remember that road, and I was always vividly thinking about these. There was an incense boat that was found in the woods, potentially dropped by monks. And that road was quite a dark, sinister road and had some weird vibes. So yeah, I remember that lighting up my imagination as a child. And yeah, I mean, the story's the story's not autobiographical. I'm so sorry, but the setting is quite autobiographical. I did grow up in this big old church-owned house, so there were always like ideas of ghosts and those, your childhood imagination runs riot on small snippets of information. So that kind of, yeah, was always part of my childhood
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
So I know I have to let you go very shortly, but one more thing I do want to ask. So unfortunately, even though we just mentioned this was a movie I would have loved to have seen a packed audience. I mean, because it's really more of a character-driven drama that's as masquerading as a supernatural ghost
Recording
story.
stopped. Recording in progress.
And I was just curious. So since that it's going on to Shudder, um, I really hope that this movie finds a huge audience on Shudder. And how would you pitch this movie to everyone that doesn't have a Shudder account?
So I think you can hopefully experience this film on several levels. Hopefully it's a tense, spooky, slightly scary, uh, thrilling kind of story that you can really enjoy and feel creeped out by, and just really entertaining in that way. And then perhaps on another level, it can speak to people about family trauma, family dynamics, your own childhood, even being a parent, and or being an older sister or a younger sister. Hopefully, it can say something to you about that as well. So, I hope it can speak to people on either or both levels, I guess.
I completely agree. Ruth, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this movie. It definitely gave me more creeps than I expected, and there is a particular scare that actually had me jumping out of my seat, which rarely happens in horror films. Congratulations. I'm hoping this film finds a massive audience, and thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Austin. I appreciate your time
Of
too.
course.
Thank you.
And you have a great day. Hit like, smash subscribe, and get notified for when our reviews, interviews, and news go live.